For women over the age of 60, changes in thinking, behavior, and daily habits rarely arrive suddenly. Most of the time they appear quietly, gently, almost politely. They begin as small shifts that are easy to explain away, easy to ignore. A woman forgets a familiar ingredient in a recipe she has prepared the same way for decades. Another steps outside on a warm summer afternoon wearing a heavy coat, unaware that the temperature has changed. A woman who once filled every room with conversation now sits silently at family gatherings, listening more than speaking. Most people brush these moments aside. They call them senior moments, normal aging, a natural slowing after many years of living. But sometimes these small changes are not simply about age. Sometimes they are early signals that the brain is beginning to struggle with organization, interpretation, and regulation, not in dramatic ways, not all at once, but quietly, piece by piece. Women experience these changes differently than men, and they experience them more often. Today, women make up the majority of people affected by long-term cognitive changes later in life. For many years, this was explained by longevity alone. Women tend to live longer. But that explanation turned out to be incomplete. What we now understand is that female brains age differently. Hormonal shifts, immune system responses, differences in brain structure, and connectivity. All of these play a role in how cognitive changes appear and how early signs are expressed. And yet, despite this higher risk, women's early symptoms are often minimized, labeled as stress, emotional shifts, menopause-related fog, or simply getting older. As a result, meaningful support is often delayed far longer than it should be. In this video, I want to walk you through 12 early warning signs of cognitive decline that are especially common in women over 60. These are signs that families almost always miss at first, not because they are careless, but because the signs do not look like memory problems in the way most people expect. Pay close attention to sign number 5 later in this video. It is one of the most overlooked signals because it has nothing to do with forgetting names or faces. It shows up in a place people rarely associate with the brain at all. Everything I share here is meant to help you notice patterns, not to label or diagnose. If you recognize several of these signs appearing together or progressing over time, I strongly recommend seeking a thorough cognitive evaluation. Early awareness creates more options, more support, and better planning. Now let's begin with a sign that often surprises families the most. Sign number 12, the disappearing social filter. One of the earliest changes many families notice has nothing to do with memory. Instead, it shows up in social behavior. A woman who spent a lifetime navigating social situations gracefully may suddenly begin saying things that feel unusually blunt or inappropriate. Comments that would once have stayed unspoken are now said aloud. Remarks about a stranger's appearance, inappropriate jokes, comments that make others uncomfortable without the woman seeming to realize why. This is not intentional rudeness, and it is not simply stress or irritability. What is happening is often a weakening of the brain's internal filter. The part of the brain responsible for impulse control, social judgment, and self-monitoring begins to lose efficiency. Normally, the brain pauses thoughts before they become words. It evaluates social context. It applies restraint. When this system weakens, that pause shortens or disappears. You may notice changes like expressions, interrupting others frequently, laughing at serious moments, making overly personal comments in public, saying things that feel out of character. For family members, this can be especially painful. The woman who taught politeness and boundaries is now the one crossing them. This shift is not about personality. It reflects changes in how the brain regulates behavior, and because it does not resemble forgetfulness, it is often ignored far longer than it should be. Sign number 10, kitchen confusion and task overload. For many women, cooking is deeply ingrained. Recipes are remembered by feel. Timing is automatic. The kitchen operates on habit and rhythm. When early cognitive changes begin, one of the first places they appear is in complex, multi-step tasks. Cooking becomes stressful, confusing, overwhelming. A woman may begin preparing a familiar meal and suddenly freeze. Multiple things are happening at once. A pot boiling, something in the oven, ingredients waiting to be prepared, and she cannot decide what to do first. This is not forgetting how to cook. The knowledge is still there. What is weakening is the brain's ability to organize steps, prioritize actions, and manage several processes at the same time. You may notice difficulty following recipes that were once effortless, confusion about timing, forgetting steps in familiar routines, trouble organizing tasks in the correct order. Similar struggles may appear elsewhere. Managing medications, planning appointments, following written instructions, balancing household responsibilities. When something practiced for decades suddenly becomes difficult, it is worth paying attention. The brain's organizational centers are working harder than they should. Sign number 9, losing the joke. The sarcasm gap, one of the most subtle early changes, is a shift toward very literal thinking. Sarcasm, irony, metaphors. These require the brain to integrate tone, facial expression, context, and memory all at once. When communication pathways weaken, this integration becomes difficult. You may notice that jokes fall flat. Sarcastic comments are taken literally. Expressions like "it's raining cats and dogs" cause confusion rather than amusement. Television shows or movies that rely on layered humor become harder to enjoy. Conversations that involve teasing or playful exaggeration may feel uncomfortable or frustrating. This change can make social interaction more tiring. The world begins to feel less nuanced, more concrete, less flexible. It is not a loss of intelligence. It is a sign that abstract processing requires more effort than it once did. Sign number 8. Changes in the sense of smell. This is a sign very few people associate with cognitive health, yet it is one of the most telling. A woman may stop noticing familiar scents. Flowers no longer smell the same. Coffee has little aroma. Burning food goes unnoticed. Strong smells barely register. The sense of smell is closely connected to brain regions involved in memory and emotional processing. When these systems begin to struggle, smell recognition often changes early. This loss differs from normal aging. Normal aging brings mild dulling. Cognitive-related changes tend to be more noticeable and progress more quickly. Practical consequences can appear: not noticing spoiled food, difficulty detecting smoke or gas, reduced enjoyment of meals. Because smell is rarely tested during routine checkups, this sign is often missed entirely. The eyes tell a quiet story. Gaze and blink changes. During conversations, most of us instinctively read faces. Eye movement, blinking, subtle shifts in attention. These signals help us feel connected. When early cognitive changes begin, the eyes often behave differently long before memory complaints appear. You may notice that a woman blinks less than she used to. Her gaze may feel fixed, almost as if she is staring through someone instead of engaging with them. Eye contact may become inconsistent. Tracking moving objects might seem slower. Blinking is not just about eye moisture. It gives the brain brief pauses to process visual information. When blinking slows, visual processing becomes less flexible. The face may appear less expressive, less responsive to social cues. You might observe prolonged staring, reduced blinking, slower eye movements, difficulty shifting focus smoothly. These changes do not mean the person is uninterested. They reflect the brain working harder to interpret visual information. Because the eyes are deeply connected to processing speed and motor coordination, these shifts can be early indicators that cognitive systems are under strain. Sign number 7, objects in impossible places. Everyone misplaces things occasionally. That is part of normal life. But there is a specific pattern of misplacement that deserves attention. This is not losing keys on the wrong table. It is finding everyday objects in locations that make no logical sense. Eyeglasses inside the freezer, the phone placed in a refrigerator drawer, the television remote discovered in a bathroom cabinet, mail placed in the oven, jewellery dropped into the trash. What makes this different is not forgetfulness alone. It is a breakdown in spatial reasoning and categorization. The brain normally keeps track of what object is being held and where it belongs. When this system weakens, actions lose context. The refrigerator door opens, but the brain no longer tracks what is in the hand. The object is left behind wherever the person happens to be. Another key detail is the inability to mentally retrace steps. When something goes missing, most people can replay recent actions and narrow down possible locations. In early cognitive decline, this replay function weakens or disappears. If illogical placements happen repeatedly, it suggests the brain is struggling to organize space and sequence. Sign number 6. The repetitive loop. This is often the moment families begin to feel uneasy. A question is asked, it is answered clearly. Minutes later, the same question appears again, then again, with no recognition that it has already been asked. This is not distraction, and it is not stubbornness. It reflects difficulty forming new, short-term memories. The brain normally takes new information, briefly holds it, and then stores it. When this transfer process weakens, information enters the mind, but does not stay. You may notice repeating the same question many times, telling the same story multiple times in one conversation, rechecking doors or appliances repeatedly, calling family members again and again about the same topic. Many women are especially skilled at masking this change. They nod, smile, use polite responses. Social habits help hide confusion, sometimes for a long time. For caregivers and family members, this pattern can be emotionally exhausting. The key to understanding is realizing that the repetition is not intentional. Each question feels new to the person asking it. This loop reflects a real difficulty in storing new information, not a lack of effort or attention. Sign number 5. The financial fog, when numbers stop making sense. This is the sign almost everyone misses, and it is one of the most dangerous because it hides in plain sight. Most people believe cognitive decline begins with forgetting names or faces, but very often it begins with numbers. For many women over 60, managing money has been part of daily life for decades. Paying bills, balancing accounts, budgeting groceries, calculating tips without thinking twice. When early cognitive changes begin, numbers often become confusing before anything else does. A woman who was once precise may suddenly miss a utility payment. She may struggle to calculate a simple tip at a restaurant. Prices stop making intuitive sense. Financial paperwork feels overwhelming. Bank statements look unfamiliar, even though nothing has changed. This happens because the brain areas responsible for numerical reasoning, sequencing, and logical organization begin to lose efficiency. Numbers require structure, order, pattern recognition. When that structure weakens, money becomes mentally exhausting. You may notice missed or duplicate bill payments, confusion about due dates, difficulty calculating change or tips, trouble understanding bank statements, unusual or impulsive purchases, increased vulnerability to phone or email scams. Because money is deeply personal, many women hide these struggles. They feel embarrassed, they fear losing independence. So mistakes stay hidden until the consequences grow. This is why the financial fog is so dangerous. It often progresses quietly for years. By the time family members notice, significant damage may already be done to savings, credit, or stability. If you notice a sudden change in how finances are handled, I strongly recommend stepping in gently. Not with judgment, with support. Simple steps can help. Automating essential payments, reviewing accounts together, simplifying financial responsibilities, creating safeguards against scams. These steps are not about control. They are about protection and peace of mind. Sign number 4. The wandering word. When language slips away, everyone has moments where a word sits just out of reach. That is normal. But there is a specific pattern of word difficulty that deserves attention. Instead of naming an object, a woman may describe it. She might say, "that thing you write with," instead of "pen," or "the clicker for the box," instead of "remote." Words like thing, stuff, or that thing over there begin to appear more often. She still understands what the object is and how it works. What is missing is the label, the name itself. This pattern is called word retrieval difficulty. The brain holds the concept but struggles to access the specific word. You may notice frequent pauses mid-sentence, substituting vague terms for specific names, creating descriptive phrases instead of naming objects, frustration during conversation, abandoning sentences halfway through. At first, this can seem harmless, even humorous, but over time, conversations become more effortful. Speaking requires more energy. Social interaction may feel tiring. Because language is such a core part of identity, this change can be emotionally difficult. Many women withdraw slightly, speaking less to avoid embarrassment. If word searching becomes frequent and persistent, it suggests the brain's language pathways are under strain. Sign number 3, the quiet goodbye to hobbies. This sign often hides behind a simple explanation. She just lost interest. She's tired of it. She grew out of that hobby. But for women over 60, walking away from long-loved hobbies is often not about boredom. It is about mental effort. Hobbies like knitting, quilting, playing cards, reading novels, or attending book clubs require more cognitive work than most people realize. They depend on memory, sequencing, attention, and planning. When cognitive systems begin to struggle, these activities become exhausting instead of enjoyable. A woman who once loved knitting may say she no longer feels like doing it. A devoted reader may stop finishing books. A regular bridge player may quietly leave the group. This withdrawal is rarely laziness. It is often a protective response. Continuing the activity highlights confusion and frustration. Stepping away preserves dignity. You may notice abandoning hobbies that were practiced for years, avoiding group activities, saying, "I just don't enjoy it anymore," preferring passive activities like watching television. The important detail is timing. When hobby withdrawal appears before obvious memory changes, it can be an early signal that mental load has become uncomfortable. Staying mentally engaged matters, but engagement should feel supportive, not overwhelming. Gentle activities, familiar routines, low-pressure interaction. Sign number 2. The storyline slip. When narratives fall apart. Following a story requires holding information over time, characters, events, context, connections. When working memory weakens, this becomes difficult. You may notice confusion during movies or television shows. A character introduced earlier is suddenly unfamiliar. Plot details feel lost. Questions like, "Who is that?" or "Why is this happening?" appear repeatedly. This is not lack of attention, it is difficulty holding and integrating information in real time. You may also notice trouble following conversations, asking for repeated explanations, confusion about sequences of events, difficulty understanding complex news stories. Books often become especially challenging. Reading requires sustained focus and memory across chapters. Many women quietly stop reading, saying they cannot find anything interesting anymore. What is really happening is that the mental effort required to follow narratives has increased significantly. This can be deeply frustrating for both the person experiencing it and their loved ones. Patience and simplified explanations help reduce stress and preserve confidence. Sign number 1: changes in walking speed and movement. This final sign surprises many people. The brain and the body are deeply connected. Walking is not just a physical action, it requires balance, coordination, planning, and constant adjustment. When cognitive reserves begin to decline, walking often changes. Pay attention to shorter steps, slower pace, slight shuffling, hesitation when turning, difficulty walking and talking at the same time. One particularly telling sign is dual task difficulty. If a woman needs to stop walking in order to finish a sentence, it suggests the brain is struggling to manage multiple tasks at once. Walking demands more cognitive resources than most people realize. When processing capacity is reduced, the brain prioritizes one task over another. Movement changes often appear gradually. Because they feel physical rather than mental, they are easy to overlook. But when combined with other signs in this video, gait changes offer valuable insight into overall brain health. Final thoughts. What really matters? None of these signs alone tells a full story. Aging is complex. Everyone changes over time. What matters is pattern, progression, combination. If you notice several of these signs appearing together or gradually increasing, I strongly recommend seeking a comprehensive evaluation. Early awareness allows for planning, support, and informed decisions. Most importantly, approach these changes with compassion. For the person experiencing them, the world may feel increasingly confusing. Gentle structure, reassurance, familiar routines, and respect go a long way. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this video helped you understand something you've been noticing, I encourage you to share it with someone who may benefit. You are not alone in navigating these changes. Awareness is the first step toward clarity and support.